Okay, Kudus.
Yeah,
So on
good
top of the
morning. Yeah, it's top of the hour and good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us this early morning to continue our conversation on research ethics and its importance. This morning, we'll be delving into something very important, which I'm sure many researchers have had encounter with, which is practical protocols, ethical approvals, and how participants are protected in research. This morning, Professor Folayan will be demystifying the review process, letting us know what goes on during ethical review and how participants are protected from arms of research. Without wasting our time, I'll call on Prof to take over the call. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Kudus, and welcome everyone. And it's a pleasure to have you again this week, looking at what it means to get your protocol prepared, submit it for approval. And beyond ethics, beyond the approval, what does it mean for you also to ensure participants' protection? And there was a brilliant question during the on the platform that says, "Oh, how is our um, researchers protected?" We'll probably mention what this is also during the ethics approval process. But largely, please note that for researchers, your institution is your protector, and you must find a way to ensure that your institution has policies in place that guide you as to what is expected, including things like data security and data protection. Otherwise, you become unduly exposed to um, laws and things that may otherwise harm your protection and your integrity. I keep saying this because you as an individual in any institution can mobilize the process. Ask many people that make changes in their institution, they listen to lectures like this and they go back and mobilize and get things done. Things to do aren't going to be difficult because there are lots of samples of guidelines that other institutions have already developed. You don't have to start from zero. All you do is adapt appropriately for your institution. So if you do need help, contact Kudus and myself and we can support you. But please do not listen to this and think, oh, um, let's another day go by as usual. Be the change agent in your institution and start to move your institution to do the things that are right. So for this session, we're going to go through four different things. At the end of the day, you should be able to understand what happens with the ethics review process. Why is it important? We explained that last week. Why is it important? Why is ethics critical? And I would love to hear from you, even if you send it in the chat box, what you had learned last week and what still resonates with you from last week's teaching to this teaching to today. Please do share points in the chat box. I would read it. The second element we'll be looking at is the informed consent documentation. What are the 8 critical elements that must be in your informed consent and why they are critical? I can assure you that what we'll be learning today within this hour is very brief. For those on the platform, we'll continue our engagement day by day, looking at what informed consent is and how does that differ for assent? What are the types of assent there are and why this is critical? And then third to the last, I'll be the third point today, we'll be looking at confidentiality and data security. Confidentiality is synonymous with data security. That's different from privacy. We'll mention privacy and why that is key. And then the last thing is look at what the risk-benefit analysis is and what it is when you're considering risk. Many times I read ethics protocol and they say there's no risk, it doesn't exist. What you have is minimum risk, moderate risk, or maximum risk or high risk. There's low risk, there's moderate risk, and there's high risk. There is nothing so-called no risk. It doesn't exist. There's always a risk. But when you look at the risk-benefit analysis, and I'll talk about what it means even for ethics committee who are trained on the risk-benefit analysis, you must be able to do at least some of it on your own to know that benefit must outweigh the risk. So let's go into the session today. Once again, this is reiterating the fact that ethics is the foundation of trust and integrity. Ethics is the foundation. When we're talking about managing your study protocol, it's not something in abstract. There must be evidence for that, and that is why you develop your protocol so as to give the evidence of what you want to do, and somebody else will scrutinize it. If you remember from last week, we learned that the ethics committee is the unbiased judge. the external person that can see things that you otherwise might be clouded with because of your interest in the research. Not only that, they are trained, they have training to be able to decipher what is ethical or unethical, especially within our own environment and context. And that's why even when we talk about the National Health Research Ethics Committee, context matters. That's why your institution also has its own ethics committee, not just the central, because your ethics committee understand your context and therefore see your context, read your protocol with a lens of ethics for its application to context. Okay, so it matters. It matters because they are the unbiased judge, and then they will be able to advise appropriately on how to address critical issues in your protocol that will reduce the risk of exploitation. So when the ethics committee review your protocol, the first thing they are doing, and for most times 80% of the work they are doing, is protecting the participants. They're safeguarding the right, the welfare, and the dignity of every participant. Participants should not be reduced or decimaled to data. They are human beings, even though they generate the data, but they are more than data. They are human beings, and their dignity and their welfare must be addressed. Without them, you do not have your research results. In some way, it also protects the researchers because once you understand ethics and follow compliance, the risk of litigation against your sanctions is less, almost nil. The big thing I tell people is that if you are not aware, the power that comes with your receiving the ethics clearance is almost, it's a legal document actually. Once you receive an ethics clearance from an institution, the legality is that any reason that would make you go to court because of your research is transferred. The liability is transferred to the ethics committee straight. So if you have your ethics clearance, you hold it. Anybody is going to court, you just hold it. Once the ethics committee has been legally constituted, that liability goes to the ethics committee. And so it's the ethics committee that goes running up and down, not you. And I've seen it happen in Nigeria during the PrEP controversy when there was a lot and there were really, really critical things coming up. It was the ethics committee running up and down. The researcher had nothing, no headache. And that's one of the reasons why it is required that every ethics committee, not only is it autonomous from the institution, but also they have an insurance cover. They must have insurance cover. That's one of the requirements for the establishment. If you read the Nigerian Ethics Code, so that if there are liabilities, they can fall back on insurance. But of course, you must be on the right path. They couldn't have given an approval and you're doing something else and creating liabilities. Of course, when you have your ethics clearance and ethics process in place, the institution itself is also protected. And more importantly, it's about rigor, ensuring ethical integrity and scientific validity. I put scientific validity here because the ethics committee in Nigeria looks at the science or arts. Please note that the use of science here just means methodology. They look at it as well as the ethics. In many places abroad, there's separation. In the US Ethics Committee, just focus on the ethics. Somebody else looks at the science. In Ilorin, I think Ilorin has an excellent example where the research committees in the faculties look at the science, ensure the science is valid, and send it to the ethics committee that looks at ethics. But the Nigerian regulation stipulates that the science and the ethics is the jurisdiction of the ethics committee, because when the science is not valid, ethics cannot be valid. I repeat that once the science is not valid, ethics cannot be valid. However, the science can be valid and ethics is compromised. So it lies in their jurisdiction to ensure that there's somebody looking at the methodology appropriately, and at the same time, they are looking at the ethics and they are trained to look at the ethics. Please ask your FA institution that is their ethics. Have they renewed their certificates in the last 2 years, because they ought to renew certificates every 2 years. There are many ethics committees that are operating illegally. They don't have the certification from the national body, because the national body must accredit you every 2 years. And that becomes a problem. And I'll tell you an example of a problem that one of my, one of the researchers in IFE had. That what is it? That guy did something clinical trials, and I'm not going here to explain the details, but there are levels of approval. If you're doing epidemiological studies or those kind of level of studies, the clearance at the institutional level is okay. But when you're doing things invasive like clinical trials, you have to get approval from NAFDAC. So what happens is that NAFDAC will only recognize, please just give me a minute. Naya is disturbing me. Naya, just a minute. Naya, Naya. Stop it. Yeah, it's disturbing me. There's noise. Apologies. Okay. So, apologies, I was distracted. I'm so sorry. So at that level, you have to go to NAFDAC to get approval. So what happened? This was the guy that got the best prize at the fellowship because the study was good, it was solid. He had to invest a lot of money to get the instruments that he used to measure. Very top study. And he got the best prize. However, at the time of publication, then I asked him for registration for clinical trials. Of course, he registered for ethics. He didn't go to NAFDAC or clinicaltrial.gov to register his protocol. So now he wanted to go, which was already wrong. Please know that you don't go to ethics for ethics clearance after you have done your study. It's illegal. You don't do it. You can't do that. The ethics clearance, you go to ethics committee to get ethics clearance for your proposed study. So they would have seen they would have reviewed the scientific validity and the ethical integrity of your proposed study. They do not review scientific validity and ethics integrity of a study that has been conducted. Once it has been conducted, it's the peer review process that takes that. I hope we will be taking you through the value of peer review. If we don't take it, we're going to take it in a webinar. We're going to invite you to please be part of that webinar. So that itself is another process. So now what he wanted, because he needed his ethics clearance, he wanted to go, through the back door, pretend it hadn't happened and then get it. Of course, when he got to NAFDAC, NAFDAC would not even give him approval, not because he has done, because he didn't present it as if it had been done, but because the ethics committee had not received clearance from the national after many years. So they wouldn't handle it. And that's what happens. Many ethics committees in the country, they don't even have approval. Those that have approval are already expired. Please ask your institution, make them accountable if they have valid approval processes, if they've been validated by the national. Because what happens is that things change and the national has levels of training. They have modules for levels. So if you have just done basic, you have not done intermediate, you have not done, the advanced, then you truly don't have competence. And you'll be seeing one of the places where I think the training on risk-benefit analysis is at the intermediate level. So, they come in, members of ethics committee are not all bioethicists. They are not. In fact, for many places, there are very few bioethicists in the country. Many ethics committees don't even have bioethicists. So this little training is what empowers them to ensure that they are rigorous in their assessment and objective in their assessment. So let's look at the ethics review process and what IRP stands for. First of all, to know that ethics review committees in Nigeria are in autonomous body and everywhere in the world. That means the institution can set them up, but they are not reporting to the institution. They are reporting to the National Health Research Ethics Committee in Nigeria, situated in the Federal Ministry of Health in the SKT unit or so. And their role is to the right and welfare of the human research participants. We don't use subject in Nigeria. Americans use subject. In Nigeria, we use participants. Very recently, the updated declaration of Helsinki also notes that they have moved away from use of subject, the word subject, and rather participants, which is much respectful. Their role, like I said, is to review, approve, monitor, and modify research protocols involving human participants. Please note that one of the things we've talked about extensively is review and approval, but then they should be monitoring, and there are mechanisms for monitoring. When we get onto the platform, we'll talk about monitoring. Please, if you're participants here, please remind us all the things we're taking back to the platform to continue to discuss. They monitor. It is their obligation to monitor every research protocol that they approve many, many times. And I'm sure you would also give examples. where protocols are approved, but when you're in the field, you're doing something different. They approve you to give consent, you never give consent, you just get them to sign. They approve you to do something, and then you're doing something else. And I have had a case as a whistleblower when people reported and said, oh, why can this ever have happened twice? One a national study and one an institutional study. And then we whistleblowed and went to the ethics committee and said, how could you have given an approval for a study where you're sticking pins into a child 5 different times? And then the ethics committee went to the field, met with the researcher, and they said that they're doing something different from the protocol that they approved. And it's the same thing also at a national study where we raised an issue about, I think, HPV testing, and what they were doing on the field is different from what was approved. So it's that monitoring that also keeps people in place. This is the big part of ethics committee function that is least respected. Okay, because they do not have systems, they do not have the function, they do not have the money to do it. So you may be able to understand why you have to pay token fees for the approval process to enable them do all those things. Even if when they're reviewing, they have to do photocopies, they have to give their members, when the members come, they don't pay members. Please note this committee, and I'll explain that why it's called committee. But they would give tokens, they will not tokens, they will give refreshments, they have to do organized trainings, and that comes with a cost. So this little tokens that they ask you to pay when you're submitting your protocol all goes into something. Please note that one of the reasons you find that Nigeria uses Health Research Ethics Committee as opposed to IRBs, institutional review boards, that you find all over the world for most part, is because board is synonymous with money. Board is synonymous with allowance in Nigeria. When you say something is a board, it comes with honorarium and allowance. Health Research Ethics Committee members work voluntarily. They are not paid. They are not given honorarium. So Nigeria chose to use the word committee because of that difference in synonym. Please note that once the said Health Research Ethics Committee is not that this is limited to biomedicals. One of the things that you'll be seeing in the revision going forward is the removal of the health. The connotation of health has to do with the fact that whatever form of research you do with leaves, with plants, with chemicals, all have impact on the health and well-being of people individually. We talked about that extensively last week. And the guiding principle, once again, are the 3 otherwise divided into 4: respect for persons, which is about ensuring their autonomy; beneficence, which is about minimizing harm and maximizing benefit; beneficence is divided into non-maleficence, which means even when you cannot benefit me, please do not harm me. Ensure that you leave me the way I am, don't leave me worse off. And then the last is justice, which is the least respected of all the principles, where there's fair distributions of burdens and benefits. So what does the ethics committee do? It's about risk-benefit assessment. Is this research justified? All right. The risk-benefit assessment is a training on its own. There's the use of a risk-benefit calculus, and I'll give you an example when I get to risk-benefit assessment section. They would review the informed consents to ensure that the people that you are consenting to participate is adequately consented in a way that they are able to take decision based on adequacy of information they've received. Please note that in Nigeria, the scale is tilted towards ensuring written consent. If you read the ethics code and the requirement for verbal consent, I tell you, you won't do verbal consent. You go straight to written consent. It's a whole procedure on its own. It's about 2 pages long, the things that you need to do if it's verbal consent you are receiving. And verbal consent has to be documented. That means you have to record it with the presence of a number of things. But written consent is the way to go. There must be documentation because it's a legal document. Of course, you can get written consent and the person can prove in court that they did not have any. It wasn't informed. It's true that it wasn't understood. Whatever it is that you are telling them wasn't understood. And therefore, you would see when we get to the session on informed consent, what it means to ensure understanding rather than just obtaining signatures. Privacy and confidentiality is about protection of privacy, protection of data. I'll be talking about that. And what does vulnerable population mean? And how you have additional protections for vulnerable population. Of course, review also means what does it take for the ethics committee to require of you for continuous review of your studies. For many of you, if you go read your ethics clearance, they will tell you to send back a report of your concluded study. Many of us do not, including myself. That's part of the monitoring process. They must have a documentation of the the protocols that they have approved. Ideally, they should be on the field to monitor what you're doing, but at the least, you must submit the report of the piece of work you've done once you've concluded as a monitoring process for them. So when you want to submit your protocol, what it is, there's steps for you to prepare, then submit, review, because they will send back comments to you, and then your outcomes and post-approval processes. So when you prepare, what does it take? Please note that there are regulations. Nigeria has one of the best codes in the world. Please go as a researcher. It's just like when you are a Muslim, you have your Quran as your guide. If you are a Christian, you have your Bible as your guide. That's your touchlight. That's your bearing. If you are a researcher, you have a guide. You must read the Nigerian Ethics Code to understand what it is that you are into. Just like you're Muslim or you a Christian and you are not referencing that booking to guide your ways of life is abnormal. It's the same thing if you're a researcher. You say you're a researcher, you're working in the research industry, and you don't know what is in the Nigerian Ethics Code. It's easily accessible. Just type on Google Nigerian Ethics Code, it downloads for you. It's undergoing review at the moment, but you must know at least the basic fundamentals. So know your regulations and complete ethics training. For some institution, before you get your ethics clearance, they will ask you to do the training. For example, I know Ibadan, they'll ask you to do the CITI training and attach the certificate so that at least you have some basic knowledge. And for those of you that are here and we want to have a certificate for this training, we're going to refer you for another mini training, where you also go and get the certificate before we add our own certificate for you. You develop your study protocol. Yesterday, I shared with us on our platform the minimum contents of a protocol and how each of those contents are guided by ethics principle. Please, once again, go back to that and take each section. I think there's about 12 sections there that will enable you to develop the entire content of a study protocol. If you don't, many institutions will have a guide as to what the content should be when you're submitting. Also submit along with it other materials like your consent form, your recruitment survey, your questionnaire. If you're doing questionnaire, these are appendixes that you must also send because the content also have to be reviewed. The consent form has to be reviewed to ensure that it can convey an understanding to a low literate person. In Nigeria, it is expected that the language that you use in your consent form should be understood by GSS 3 students. Okay, so they want to review it. This is not the place that you'll be saying things like randomization or big English. You must break it down in a way that is understood by anybody of GSS 3 standard. Your recruitment material, your questionnaires must be, because it's very important to read through the questionnaires. Your questionnaires might be intrusive. Sincerely, there's been Professor Adich, a colleague shared about a protocol questionnaire that they asked, quite intrusive. It was asking about widows and asking them, when did your husband die? Since your husband died, have you had, sex life? And many widows keep breaking down and crying, because they took, they took part in the study. I can tell you also from my own experience, that negative experience. I did a national survey that involved over 14,000 people that we collected data from. And one of the questions in that data was about abortion. If anybody had an abortion. This was a survey that collected over 14,000 respondents all over Nigeria. Very well structured, excellently structured, I would say. The response we got about 2 people that said they committed abortion. I'm sure you'd laugh because that's not true. Why? Because we created a questionnaire that was not sensitive in its approach to asking questions. In Nigeria, where abortion is illegal, you don't ask that kind of question like that. There are ways. If the social scientist has reviewed that protocol, had reviewed that questionnaire, they would have guided us appropriately on how to ask that question and be sure that we get the right answers. Research is not just to collect data, it's about collecting truth. Truth. so that you can share that truth in a way that we can move forward. So you must design your study to collect truth, not just collect data, not just to collect figures. All right. And everything about it must create a safe environment for your respondent in a way that they feel comfortable to be able to share that truth with you. And that's why privacy and confidentiality becomes very important, so that you're sure that you're collecting the fact that you need to collect to generate truth and tell us valid information when you conclude your study. Please always refer to the HREC guides if you have questions. Please know that the GOTS, the Nigerian Ethics Code, says your ethics committee could even run consultative work hours, so that you can come to them and get clearance before you submit your ethics protocol. Many ethics committee will have their forms before you submit. Please get the forms and fill out the forms. If they are online, you upload. If they are physical, you submit hard copies. I know the Nigerian Institute of Medical Research is online. I think my own institution also you send as an attachment, but you can also send physically. You also submit the study protocol, your informed consent documents as attachment, recruitment materials if you're advertising them, your data collection tools. They will want to know about your data management plan. Please know that this is very important. Data management plan includes how long you're going to store your data, if it's going to be open access, if it's going to be de-anonymized. So we'll be talking about the data management shortly, and then institution, your investigator CVs. It's very important to be sure that your investigator, the PI, has the competency to do the study. There's no point doing a study on sexual and reproductive health and you're dealing with a virologist who has no history of dealing with sexual and reproductive health as the PI. Or you have a PI who is planning to implement a study that is $50 million, and the largest study this PI has ever handled is a 5,000 naira study. So these are the kind of things that they review around competency and advise appropriately. They would also want to look at your responses to the risk questions. Once again, remember that there's no research that is free of risk. What you have is minimum. And I'll be talking about the types of risk. There are 5 different types of risk. So when you're now going to the review and they accept it, the DEX officer has reviewed and should be sure that all the materials that you need to submit has been submitted and they've accepted to review it. It either goes to 3 types of review, one of 3. The first might be exempt review. Please know that it is not you. You don't exempt yourself from review. The committee uses an exempt review and they give you a certificate that says it's exempt review, and I'll explain what that is. Exempt review means that the protocol that you submitted has minimum risk. This minimum risk is something like you're going to do this class and you're going to count the number of chairs and versus the number of students. I mean, like doing an audit. All research that are audit related are simply exempt review. What exempt review means that you do not, one, need informed consent for those kind of research, and 2, there's minimum oversight. You can do without monitoring, for this kind of review. But there's the ethics committee that decides. Of course, it's very important to you to know what category your type of protocol falls into. And if you read the code, it is very well explained. The types of review that fall into the various categories, very well explained. The next is the expedited. And what happens with the exempt is that it can be reviewed on the table of the ethics committee chair or its designate. The ethics committee chair or designate. So in the committees, they might have designate. You set of people will review exempt. You set of people will review expedited. Usually full committee review, everybody reviews, and I'll be talking about it in a while. So exempt, and usually with exempt, within 1 to 2 weeks, you should get your ethics clearance. And it's the same with expedited. In expedited, it means that the risk involved is not more than what anybody will face in their normal day-to-day life. I repeat that. When your protocol is categorized as expedited for expedited review, it means that the risk involved is not more than what anybody will experience in their every day-to-day life. And I'll give an example. For example, somebody crossing the zebra crossing in America, or somebody crossing the zebra crossing in the UK, it's minimum risk because the system is such that that risk is what they would get involved with in their everyday to day life. If you're doing a study in Nigeria that is looking at the time it takes an elderly to cross the zebra crossing, that is not minimal risk. That is high risk in Nigeria. Why have I given this example? I've given this example to explain that context matter. What is the way or the category or protocol in the UK will fall is not exactly the same that it might fall in Nigeria. And therefore, when you're doing collaborative studies, you cannot come and be arguing that, oh, this is the way it's done in the US. It's not. The way the operations of ethics and protocol handling in the US is different from the way it is handled here. And that is because of the context. And please appreciate that. I'll also talk about one when I do full committee review. For full committee reviews, when the risk is more than minimum, it will go to full committee review, which means two things. One, if it's an invasive study, they're going to give you injection, they're going to give you drugs in your mouth. If the questions is intrusive, then it's a full committee, which means the whole committee will review that protocol, and at the convening of the committee to be discussed, the consensus will be reached as to what next will have to be done with the protocol. In addition, if that protocol involves a vulnerable population, in Nigeria, it goes through ethics committee. Vulnerable populations are all listed in the declarant, include pregnant women, children, any study involving pregnant women, children, people that are at risk based on legal compromise. For example, female sex workers, men who have sex with men, people who use drugs. These are people that are at risk because of the legal position of the country. So this kind of groups of persons, and there are a list of others. Please note that I've just touched homeless people and others. Of course, there's also context relevance. Homeless people is a big deal for the US. In Nigeria, we really have to deal with homeless. Our elderly are cared for, and largely. This kind of protocols involving this vulnerable population would go through full committee review. Why have I said this? In the US, you could have vulnerable populations and they can go through expedited. It's not the same in Nigeria. Every vulnerable population, whether it's invasive or not. In the US, it's vulnerable population with invasive that might go through full committee review. In Nigeria, once it's vulnerable population, whether it's invasive or not, it goes through full committee reviews. So please understand that distinction, the rules of the UK and the US when you're doing collaborative research does not supersede the rules of the country. There are context-specific requirements that makes the review process differ country by country. So please, once again, I encourage you, you must know the rules and regulations affecting your country, Nigeria. The code is there, please adhere to it. Once they have reviewed, they would send you a determination. It can be approved, please go ahead. It can be, please modify major, or please modify minor, or it can be disapproved. The study will not be approved. Many times you will get minor revision or major revision. Very few times do you get straight approval. Please know that you cannot start your research implementation before you get ethics approval. I repeat that you cannot start your research implementation before you collect ethics approval. You get your ethics approval before you go to implement your protocol. The second thing that matters to note is that your approval is usually in Nigeria is only for 1 year. It's not everywhere all over the world. In Nigeria, your approval is only for 1 year, which means if your research is applied in January, by December, you have not implemented, you have to go back and renew your protocol. Renew the request for protocol, and then they won't give you a new approval, they will just update that approval. This matters so that you know, okay? And disapproval is very rare in Nigeria. This is very, very rare. They would disapprove if there's evidence that you are there's plagiarism. Many of us know, somebody did a study 5 years ago, then you come and do it exactly in the same, or 2 of you are submitting the same protocol. There are really rules that will tell you no, but Nigeria is very bent on getting a lot more studies out. And so you really would have disapproval. There are cases of disapproval. Disapproval might happen if after many times they've asked you to modify, you're not modifying, and they will disapprove also. Once they have asked you, please send your modification and amendments. to them. If when you're also on the field, which happens many times very easily, you find out that you have to amend your protocol. You have to change the way you had planned to do. Please note that you must write first back to the ethics committee amending the protocol, and then they will give you approval to go ahead with the amendment. Don't go ahead with the amendment before you receive approval. Okay, these are the rules. You can bend it, you know the implications for bending, but these are the rules. These are the rules that get you into court and get you into trouble. Please know the rules, because anything can come up and I can share you with your experience. So if you're on the field and on the field you see, oh, things are going this way, I need to change. Please change. After approval, send to the committee for amendment, and you will get your amendment. This will be treated with ECASAS expedited. And within 2 weeks, you should get, don't do, and then if your approval is going to expire in December, don't ask for a renewal of your approval in December. Start to apply for it in November, so that when you get it in December, you can continue. Okay, that is how it happens. And then if there's any adverse events or protocol deviations that happen in the field, you must report back to the ethics committee. And then, like I said, annually, you're supposed to submit your reports of how far. If you finish to submit the report, if you are closing out to submit the report. One of the greatest crime that a research team was held on was failure to submit closure reports. This international study came into Nigeria. They just packed and left. They never submitted a closure report with NAFDAC. That was one of the hits that they had when advocates took them on. So the right thing is for us to, I am very guilty about this. Ethics committee don't even come and after you, but keep to the rules, because you never know when these things matter. Now let's quickly go through informed consent. It's very brief. We'll do a lot of talking on the platform. Please know that the key thing about the keywords when we're looking at informed consent, one is voluntary. You cannot coerce anybody to get it done. It's voluntary. They must choose to participate. And if they choose not to participate in your research, they must have no consequences about it. The second key word about that informed consent is an understanding. You must do everything possible within your power to ensure that they understand the elements, the 8 elements that are there. It is only after they've understood that you can say that you have informed consent. And of course, there must be evidence for the participant to say, I want to participate. That evidence is the signature that comes with it. That is not the critical thing, but that signature matters. Why is informed consent a big thing? Think about it. In the entire research process, the only place where the research participant has a voice is at the informed consent stage. That is the only place. They are not with you when you're developing your protocol. They're not with you when you're doing anything, when you collect your data, when you analyze it, when you publish, when you become a Nobel Prize winner. They are not anywhere. The only place where they have a voice is the consenting stage. So at that point, they can ask questions, they can clarify, they can have a voice. And you do not have a right to take it away from them. You must follow the process. And that is what it's called, the respect for autonomy. So these are the 8 elements that must be there in your study. You must include the purpose, the duration, the process, the foreseeable risk and the discomfort, and what you'll be doing to address it. The potential benefit, please know that you're giving them their transport reimbursement is not benefit. What is the potential benefit for the research? All researchers do not always benefit, but there must be a foreseeable benefit. For example, you're collecting data about knowledge, attitude, and practice. What's the foreseeable benefit of the knowledge, attitude, and practice that you're doing? It can't just be because you want to get a PhD degree or you want to finish your undergraduate study. Research has to have an output. You must be doing something to answer a question, a gap in knowledge. Whether you're undergraduate or postgraduate or diploma, you must be doing a research that is answering a question, a gap in knowledge. And that's why it's a crime in ethics that you do not disseminate your results. It is a crime. Please note that. You cannot generate knowledge, waste people's time, waste people's energy, waste money, even if it's your father's money, and then put the research under the table. Why? Because you just answered a question that nobody had an answer to. And then when you do not disseminate it, somebody can build on it. Another person in another 2 years' time would think that has not been done, and then waste a circle of money, time, for something we otherwise should know, and that next person should be building on. I'm not the one saying it's a crime. Please look at your ethics document everywhere. You must disseminate results, and there are multiple ways of disseminating results. It's not just about publishing papers, conference presentation, blogs. The world is so versatile now that there's so many ways to disseminate results, and this result becomes accessible to the next person who would use it and build on it rather than repeating it. That consent must tell people about alternatives. You don't have to be in my space. If you don't engage in my research, please feel free to do other things. How you're going to ensure confidentiality, if there's injury, how you're going to compensate for it, please, and then the contact information for questions should be put in there. It also must state very clearly that the involvement in the research is voluntary. There is no penalty for withdrawing at any time, which means even if you're asking question and you're on question number 6 and you want to ask 20 questions and the person says, I don't want to continue, the person has a freedom to say, I don't want to continue without repercussion. You might have to put systems in place to address this, but that person has a right to. Okay, please feel free to ask questions. When you're giving the informed consent, please, once again, it's about privacy. Ensure that it's a quiet, private place without passion. There's nothing so-called group consent. It doesn't exist. Group consent is illegal. You can provide information as a group, but one-on-one. Consenting is a one-on-one thing that you do in a private place. I'll talk about one of the things I learned very recently in my research is that context matters. For example, we were on the field going around recruiting. It was a population-based study. And then we were bringing women. Once we bring women one-on-one, a man will appear. A man will appear. But we said the English consenting process requires that it is one-on-one. Nobody must be there. And then when we ask the man to excuse, it might be brother, it might be neighbor, they just appear because they want to protect the woman, from strangers. That's our culture. And then when we want to excuse, the woman will say, no, leave them. And I raised this because I said this is a context that we must take care of in our own context. The law says privacy, but then privacy has context and meaning in our culture. We don't have a regulation to address that, but this is something the review process is ongoing, and this is something I want to submit as evidence of practice in my own context, and I want the national courts to take care of this. Language must be appropriate. You must use a language, like I said, JSS 3 language level. And if you're speaking you're collecting consent in languages, you must translate it to that language. Why? You must translate rather than using the English and translating so that the consenting process use a consistent language. So if I'm going to, for example, I'm in Lagos, I'm going to go to Yoruba community, I'm going to go to Igbo community, I'm going to go to Hausa community. You don't do the consenting form in English, and then the person consenting will just be translating in Igbo, in Hausa, in Efik, wherever they are. No, you must do the translation, and it's that translation that they will use that allows for consistency of language. Otherwise, when you're doing the English and somebody is translating, there would not be consistency. Give them time to ask questions. That is why it is a one-on-one thing. It's not just a form that they sign. And please, even when they sign, you must give them a copy. I've done a study where I worked with people and they never get the copy. They will sign and you get the copy. The signature is for you to get back. Please give them access for capacity. Once you have done the consenting, you must ask them, to tell you back what they've understood. That is the way you will assess if they have an understanding. And if your process is such that it's ongoing, at intervals, you must keep checking and ensuring that key consents are understood. The next stage is to look at...
Hello, ma.
Yes,
sorry
please.
To jump in. We have 17 minutes more.
Yes, I'm looking at my time. Thank you.
Okay.
I'll walk fast on that. So when it's confidentiality and data protection, please know that confidentiality means that you're looking at how data provided by your participants is handled, stored, and disseminated. Please know that when you have a research team, you must identify people that can handle the data. Not everybody can handle the data. There must be people designated and trained to handle data. And when you handle data, one of the biggest shocks I get many times is you go into somebody's room and then the questionnaires are all over their rooms, all over their offices. That's not confidential. You must have a way of storing data in a way that only designated person can handle the data. This data can be handled in two ways, anonymized or pseudo-anonymized. Anonymized means that there is no information trackable to an individual that you collect, which means if you collect the data and somebody says, oh, I want to extract my data, you can't because it was collected anonymously and you can't track the person. Pseudo-anonymous means that it was collected anonymously, but there's a key link. The person who gave that data, questionnaire one, you know the name and the details of questionnaire one, but that detail is stored somewhere separately and securely on that lock, on that password. That is why when you put in data on laptops, many times for studies, the laptop for your studies should be separate from your main laptops for everything. And when you have the data, it must be locked, passworded, that nobody. In fact, when you are sending that data to somebody, you usually will send it by two mails. One, the mail will have the data. A second mail will have the key and the password. You don't send both of them at the same time. They're
Hello, ma'am. Hello. We've lost you, ma'am. Sorry about that. I will get back to Prof. I'm sure she has network issues.
Apologies, I don't know what happened. The internet just went out on me. Oh, Kudus, where did I
Yeah,
end?
we lost you at yeah, here on the right page. Yeah,
Here,
yeah,
but you heard everything I said, right?
yes. Just a few
All right.
seconds.
All right. So your data management, like I noted, you have to encrypt it. Yeah, and I've explained how you do the email processing. Pseudo-anonymized, you store appropriately. You share the ways you must share data. I talked about that. I hope you heard. And then there must be retention. Please keep all your data for 10 years. That is what is your informed consent document must be kept for 10 years before you destroy it. It's the part of the code, not me saying it. Your institution must also let you know how long you must keep your data before destroying, because there are legal implications. I have had a research where I've done things and then they said, go and bring this. You know, they go back. If you never do things appropriately, then you'll be in trouble. The last piece has to do with risk benefit analysis. And this is basically to demonstrate that the research you have done, the benefit outweighs the risk. I repeat it, your benefit must outweigh the risk. There's no point doing a study that is looking at a painkiller and at the end of the day, the risk is you lose an eye. I mean, the risk doesn't outweigh the benefit. Yet, there might be a study like you're doing cancer therapy, and then losing an eye might not be as much to consider when you're talking about saving lives. So there are risks and benefits, and I'll give an example. For example, I'm doing a cancer study, and I'm recruiting from Southwest Nigeria, and my study site is in Ife, and people have to travel. It's a cancer study in children, and people have to start from Ibadan to Ife. For you, it's no big deal. The ethics committee will look, number one, you are bringing the child. Every time that mother brings the child to the hospital, that mother is going to lose income from work, especially if that mother is an informal sector. Number two, every time they travel on that road, if to Ibadan, there's a risk of an accident. That risk is not related to the study, but that road is bad. That is a risk of accident. Number three, they look at all these things, the entire component of that process. And then there's time that person is going to go back, that person is going to be tired. And then they look, is the benefit truly outweighing the risk? And then they might advise you as a researcher, why don't you put an outstation in Ibadan? If there's a lot of your patients that is going to come there from Ibadan, rather than making everybody move from Ibadan into Ife. This is the entire context of the risk benefits analysis calculus that is done. And I'm just giving you an idea, but it takes training to be able to look at this. For you, it's just a research. For the ethics committee, there are risks involved. The risk and the magnitude of risk has to do with five: physical, psychological, socio-economic, and legal risk. The financial risk that might be economic risk that might be involved. You must reimburse participants for every financial risk involved in participating in your research. There's physical risk, there might be harm, there's psychological risk, there might be trauma. I know a person that because they were involved in men who had sex, study. Because of that study, people now knew that that individual was an MSM, and that person had to leave his country. That person had to leave the country. Study. They now know that. I hope you can still hear me, Kudus.
Your audio is quite poor now, but we can hear you now.
Thank you. All right. But whatever it is, the benefit must outweigh the risk. So when you're doing your analysis, you must identify what the possible risk is, identify the severity, and put in place in your protocol how you plan to mitigate it. If your question, your study objective is to know about knowledge, why are you asking about attitude and practice? Why are you developing a questionnaire of 70 questions when all at the end of the day, you're only going to use 2 of those questions? Why are you wasting people's time for data that you don't need? That's why they would look. If this is your study objective, is your questionnaire addressing your study objective? If your study objective will actually be answered by 5 questions in your questionnaire, I'm not going to allow you to ask 50 questions because you're going to waste time and you're going to waste that data. Okay, and then you study and avoid over-promising and just balance things. I'll quickly run through in the next 2 minutes. I say I only have 9 minutes. That's when you do your informed consent, avoid jargons. Do not make claims that is not true. I can tell you examples of how those claims actually messed up studies. Let me quickly get, for example, on the field, they were telling that, the gel that was used is matching your blood. And this gel had 4 colors, red, green, and blue. You know what happened? The study participants collected the gel and they only used those that are red because for them, it's the red that matches their blood. The blue and the red, was something that, and that messed up the study. I can tell you another day. Anonymous matters. HREC processing matters. Please, HRECs are your friend. Once you get your clearance, you have a legal document. And please understand about risk and do everything to maximize benefit. In short, please know that HRECs are your partner. Informed consent must be done transparently. Protecting data is a big deal. You must do everything. I've just touched about 1% on what you do to protect data. And a credible risk and benefit analysis must be detailed, honest, and justifiable. Please note that your local NREC office becomes a resource for you. There's CTI, TI training, there's tree training that you can take to know about the Nigerian guidelines. And yes, the next studies will be on the platform. On that note, I want to say thank you and open to question. Over to you, Kudus.
Yes, thank you very much, Ma. There are lots to take home from the presentation. There are a couple of questions on the chat box, and we have just 7 minutes. I guess we probably take 2 or 3 minutes extra to capture them. So I'll go straight to the first question. How do we know the ethics committee which is legally constituted?
Ask your ethics committee. They would know. They know themselves. So when they're not ethics, because one, they must be registered with NREC. NREC on his website tries to update the ethics committee list that they have given approval for. So if you do not see the list of that, the name of that ethics committee on that list, it's not legally constituted. However, please note that that updating of that list might be delayed. So when you don't see, please go and ask your ethics committee if they have registered. And they will tell you because they know. Yes. Over.
Okay. So is it ethical to have 2 researchers using the same participants for different research?
I didn't hear that.
Is it ethical to have 2 different researchers using the same participants for different research?
There's nothing unethical for you. Don't use people. I want to correct that language. You never use people. You recruit people, you engage people in whatever you want to do. But if there are different studies and you require the same participants to engage in different studies, that's perfect. Thank you. Over.
Okay. I think we've answered this last week. Using case file, how important is ethical approval? It's very important. You must have it. The next one is how do I do an ethically balanced, community-friendly data collection using local languages with the need to preserve scientific rigor, neutrality, and informed consent, especially in places with low research literacy?
Well, if you know your context, you design your research to address the context. Addressing context does not take away rigor. It never does. So if there's low scientific research integrity, something you study around it. I can't take that lecture here. You study around it. That
Okay.
rigor, adapting your study to the local context does not take away rigor. I want to say that it does not. So don't undermine science in the name of ethics. You can never undermine science. You can undermine ethics in the name of science. And I think that is what you were raising. How do I undermine ethics in the name of science? It's not valid. But when you do ethics, you can never undermine science. Thank you. Over.
Okay. So this participant is worried about, are we concerned about how ethics committee are able to monitor community-based research outside their institution, and how do they do
Thank you.
oversight
I think
after approval?
that's an excellent question. Please, you must know the jurisdiction cover of the ethics committee. Every committee has their jurisdiction cover. For example, if I'm in a state and I am in a teaching hospital, the jurisdiction of your ethics committee is the hospital, not the town. The jurisdiction cover for the town is by the ethics committee in the Ministry of Health. That otherwise should be constituted and should get ethics approval. I give it to you that many ethics committee in the Ministry of Health does not have appropriate ethics approval, but not all of them. For example, in Cross River State, I think Akwa Ibom, they are solid and strong. The state ministry in FCT Nigeria, they're solid and strong. So if you want to do, for example, you want to do a study in this within the town, my committee would give me ethics approval because first I am their staff. And then I take the committee ethics clearance to the state because I want to do something in the town. The ethics committee in the institution, in my university or my teaching hospital does not have the jurisdiction in town. The ethics committee in OAU Ilefe does not have jurisdiction over Kwara State. You must understand jurisdiction. And therefore, if I want to do a study in Kwara State, I first get ethics clearance from my institution, OAU Ileife, who covers me as their staff. And then I take that ethics clearance to Kwara State. So you must understand jurisdiction. Excellent question. Because of the monitoring. However, ethics committee can have there's something called, that's a whole lot. Let's get it onto the platform. Over. I've answered that question.
Okay, so
excellent
someone wants
question.
an extra word on pseudo anonymous. Wants a clarification on that.
I don't understand.
He wants clarification on what pseudo anonymous means.
Please just Google what does pseudo anonymous mean. Google and it will give you an answer. Thank you.
Okay. When involved in an international study and your collaborator
let me just conclude. Just please note you have the slide on the platform. In that slide, I defined it. If it's the English that is the issue, go and Google. It will answer you. If it's about what pseudo anonymous, the slide I gave you on the platform, please read it. It's there defined. Thank you. All right, continue.
Yeah. Someone wants to know when you're in an international study and the collaborator intends to know how you intend to store your part of the national data. Is it also appropriate to say it to be stored and passworded?
Well, I won't answer that like yes or no because it depends on what you're dealing with. There are data that are small, that are huge data. Passwording may not just be enough for everything you want to do. So I will ask you to please detail and understand the size and the risk of leaking that you have to deal with, and then put all the appropriate protection. In my own institution, there is a policy on data protection alone. So please, there is a whole policy around data protection and data security, and it follows the Nigerian regulation. Nigeria has regulation on data security and data protection. You must be aware of that also. Thank you. Over.
Okay, we have 1 minute more. If you have an invite protocol from the foreign collaborator and you have met and they want you to submit a proposal for a new diagnosis test using your participant in a outbreak situation, how should you go about it?
Submit your protocol to ethics committee and they will give you a response. Thank you.
Okay. What's the application of the statement that we should ensure participants withdraw from a research at any point in time when most data would have been anonymized?
And when you were giving them consent, you already told them that the data is anonymized. And when they withdraw, you can't delete their data, but they can withdraw. You can't stop them from withdrawing. If they reach question 6, they want to stop, they can't stop. If they say they want to withdraw, you explain to them it was collected anonymously and you cannot, there's no way to find their own data, but they can stop without going further. They have the right to withdraw. Thank you. Over.
There's a quite interesting question from Azubuike Kenneth. He said he obtained ethical approval for his study. He had to make a change in his topic, but did not return back to the committee to inform them about the change of topic. The work has been published with the new topic, and he's asking if he should go back to the committee to inform them of that change at this point.
It's published. Your ethics committee only work on before going. They don't do work after you've completed the study. But I think you should go dialogue with your ethics committee and ask what works for them. Thanks for being open and honest and transparent. Thank you. Over.
Yeah. The last question here is, what's the ethical requirement of someone using Google's survey form to collect data on WhatsApp groups whose members are from different states in a region or nation?
Two things. If you're using Google, of course, you must collect ethics approval before doing it. If you're the one sending out the survey and it's collecting data from everywhere in the world, excellent. If you have members collecting data for their own states, for you, you must collect ethics clearance from their own constituency. If you have members collecting data on that Google form from every country, you must have your research partner collect ethics clearance for that. But you can send your Google form, get your clearance, and get anything from around the world. That's how it works. Thank you very much, Kudus. Thank you for this time.
I want us to take a question from the YouTube page, so that
Okay. Yes.
There's just one from there. So many researchers include more than the questions their objective allow in the name of saving costs, and so that they can use one questionnaire for multiple studies. Is this, I guess, not legal? Is this ethical?
And you already know the answer. You just want me to spend time talking. I already answered that. If your objective is 4 and your questionnaire is asking more than the objective, an ideal ethics committee should not even approve it. They will cut off those other questions because it's waste of time. Then how can you answer those questions when your ethics clearance does not cover those questions? Okay, you can answer your 4 questions and use that data as secondary data analysis if you have already written in your protocol for approval that you're going to do secondary data analysis because of the primary objective, the secondary objective, the tertiary objectives. So your secondary data analysis addresses the secondary objective that you had applied for in your ethics clearance and you're covered. But if you're going to do a data that your ethics clearance did not cover, then get ethics approval now. It's not a difficult thing. It's not even in my own institution, you can do fast track. In 1 week, you get your ethics. It's not a difficult thing. Once it becomes part of you, you must not be afraid of ethics clearance. You don't want to get an ethics clearance, you are legally covered for life. It's the institution that becomes liable in court. So do it. Just do what is right. Okay. Well done, everybody. Thanks for being here this morning. And looking forward to our engagement on the platform. Over to you, Kudus.
Yes, thank you. The other ones are a lot of thank yous, appreciation for the wonderful lecture. And with that, I'll say thank you very much, Prof. And we can have a beautiful weekend. See you next week where we'll take another important topic. Have a lovely weekend. Bye. Toby, you can end the session. There are no outstanding questions. Thank you very much.
All right.